And the first question is an easy one, so I'll give it randomly to my old friend Sandy. What can you tell me about this chap behind you?
Oh. Well, do you think that the words give it away, or is that going to be unfair? The fact that it says the Puritan.
Well...
That seems unfair.
It does seem unfair, doesn't it?
It's a horrible start to think.
Because what it is the 19th century idea of a Puritan, and in fact the 19th century idea of a Puritan, which we retain to this day, is completely inaccurate. The steeple hat and those sort of clothing, absolutely no evidence whatsoever.
They wore a beanie hat normally, did they?
They wore ordinary clothes like anybody else,
yes.
But if they were having their portraits taken, they usually wore their Sunday best, which tended to be black.
So he's not a Puritan at all?
No, he's a 19th century idea of a Puritan. You were right to say he's a Puritan because it says on it, the Puritan.
I was merely reading.
And I was being unjust, and you've lost 10 points. But it doesn't matter because you've already won.
Yeah.
So...
Do you know, I'm quite relaxed about the whole show.
Exactly. Now, what can you tell me about the Puritans in America?
They went over on the Mayflower. I keep expecting the thing to go off again.
Yeah.
They didn't go on the Mayflower.
No, the great American myth, if you like, is the Puritans arrived on the Mayflower. And they came to avoid religious persecution. In fact, they came in order to be able to persecute.
Yeah, but they hated the Quakers.
What they objected to was the religious freedom in England that meant that you could have all kinds of ranges of religion. And yes, and in 1660, they hanged a woman just for being a Quaker.
Yeah, Mary Dyer.
That's right,
yeah.
The very one. Obviously, many people did come to America to avoid persecution in other lands, but the idea that Puritans came to avoid persecution is they came to persecute. They wanted to build a country in which there could be no dissent from Puritanism.
Puritans, they regarded luxury as sinful, didn't they?
Yes.
So, and some of them set off to America and the others opened B&Bs in Britain.
Hey!
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, B&Bs, breakfast until 7. Don't call it B&B, just call it B. If you've got no intention of serving breakfast, don't call it B&B.
Do you know, I once did a trip. I sailed all the way around Britain, and we finally got to Northumbria, and on the coastline there was a house that had painted on the side. It said, bed and breakfast, hot and cold water. I thought, only in this country would you feel you must advertise that you have both.
Oh, yes. Pride.
No, it used to be hot and cold running water, is there?
Yes.
It's not just a bucket of it lying there. No, there's pipes and everything.
Yeah. In this painting, did the native there on the left, did he bring that tree to hide behind? Did it look...
He doesn't look happy.
And it does the wrong way around.
Yeah, he can see which way the wind is blowing.
I think he knows what's coming, doesn't he?
So none of it's true, Stephen, that the Puritans weren't on the Mayflower. They always say they landed at Plymouth Rock, but in fact it was Provincetown, so none of it is actually true.
I'm afraid, it's a myth. Every country likes to build up a sort of legend of its own foundation.
Well, really ugly baby.
It is a rather ugly baby.
A tiny person standing behind that woman.
It's not any use, isn't it? Don't learn that expression. Really ugly baby. There's never an opportunity to use that in real life.
Little tiny... I'm really enjoying this painting.
Yeah.
They've come all the way over and brought one pickaxe and a hat between them.
There's no basis on which to build a country, is it?
The guy on the right brought a girl.
Yeah.
And yet, 300 years later, it was the mightiest nation on earth.
Extraordinary. No thanks to him with a hat.
I don't think the man with the hat had much to do with it. Anyway, that was our first unfair question. Puritans didn't really dress like that. What key role did a Puritan pig play in the trial of George Spencer in 1641?
Is that the actual pig we're looking
No,
at?
that is not the actual pig, because that's a photograph of a modern pig posing as a 1641 pig.
A rather similar picture of myself at a spa.
Oh, no. You've got too fewer nipples.
Well, certainly the nipples were a surprise.
But that look of contentment,
yes,
I'm sure, absolutely. So one happy pig.
That's a pig in clover,
A pig in clover,
yes.
absolutely.
George, when did you say, what year did you say?
1641.
Are we talking about witchcraft in some
We're still in New Haven, Connecticut, the centre of the Puritans.
Is this a bit like that monkey they hanged in Hartlepool?
Well,
because they thought he was a Frenchman, didn't they?
Yes.
that's right.
yeah.
The monkey in Hartlepool was hanged because they thought he might be a French spy. They knew French people spoke a different language and were small, and cartoonists had gone out of their way to make them look diminutive and nasty. So they see a little monkey.
And what's more,
they buy the propaganda.
when the monkey was in the dock, it was thoroughly evasive.
Yes, exactly.
Didn't give a straight answer to any question.
This, on the other hand, is a Puritan world, and I would remind you of Leviticus 20:15.
Not eating pork, presumably.
No, if a man lie with a beast, he shall surely be put to death, and he shall slay the beast.
He laid with a pig.
George had his end away with a piece of pork.
He just fancied a bit of crackling, that's all.
It's even unfairer than that. It so happened that George was a rather ugly fellow who was bald and had one eye. And one day, a sow farrowed, I think is the right word, a litter of piglets, one of whom was strikingly similar to George and had one eye. And so George was immediately put in front of the Puritan court and accused of having lain with the pig.
He didn't have the chance to get a super injunction before. Disgraceful.
He denied it strenuously, as you might. And typically, Puritans, they then said that there shall be mercy shown should you be open and honest. So he thought, well, that means if I say yes, they'll let me off. So he said, well, yes, all right, I laid with the pig. And they said, the mercy will be shown by the Lord, but not by us. But in order for there to be a capital offence, there had to be 2 witnesses to it. So they included the pig. So they brought the pig into the trial to speak against itself, or squeak against itself, and both George and the pig were executed.
Both got the chop.
Both got the chop.
Dreadful.
Did the pig then sort of shyly look at George in a kind of... I remember that night, hey? Or...
I think the whole thing was just... It was
Pig came in and said, that bastard. Never rang. He just used me.
Some 50 years later, there was the very famous sort of mass hysteria in Salem,
the Salem witch
Massachusetts,
trials,
the witch trials. But this was before even them. There were the bestiality obsessions as well.
Who's the other? Sorry, who's the other witness though?
George.
The pig. The
George
pig.
said yes.
Oh, so his confession was...
His tricked confession was counted
indeed.
as a confession.
If you'd have been there, he'd have got off. Clark.
Yes, of course.
I'd like to think so, but these days, you convict people just on the confession. You don't even need the pig.
No, you don't. There was a man caught in an intimate situation with a donkey in 1710 in France. He was caught in the act with a female donkey, and character witnesses appeared. This was so sweet. On behalf of the donkey. So this was an honest donkey and a modest donkey and a decent donkey. So the man was executed and the donkey got off scot-free.
The law is an ass.
Yes, indeed.
It seems very unfair to execute the pig.
Totally.
If the sin is lying with a beast...
No, Leviticus, I remind you, 20:15. If a man lie with a beast, he shall surely be put to death, and ye shall slay the beast.
Ah.
Does anyone know, incidentally, why did the New Haven Puritans abolish trial by jury?
Well, the Bible has stuff about judge not that ye be not judged, which I think is in the Gospels. So does that go on to say, oh, and don't be on a jury either?
No, but oddly enough, you're in the right area. It's simply that juries are not mentioned in the Bible.
Yes.
And so they thought they had, basically, they had no place in life because they didn't have them in biblical times.
Well, what about a propelling pencil? They wouldn't have that either.
Well, quite. There are only communities of Amishes and various other brethren who don't use things.
It's a sin to use a propelling pencil.
Well, it's very hard, I agree. It's a very peculiar world, the world of the Puritan.
America's full of those strange rules. So did you know that it's still the law in Alabama that it is illegal to wear a fake moustache in church that causes laughter?
They've got Groucho Marx on that,
It's
don't they?
either size, apparently. But it's
okay if it's serious.
If people take it seriously. If it causes laughter in the church, you're out.
I think under Thatcher, or maybe just after, under John Major, there was a Lord Chancellor called Lord Mackay of Clashfern. Do you remember him?
Fine
Lord
man.
Mackay. And he was a member of the order known as the Wee Frees, who were a very extreme sect of Presbyterians. And he was actually expelled from the Wee Frees for attending the wedding of a friend who was a Catholic.
No, it was a funeral. It was a
Oh, it was
funeral.
a funeral,
It was a funeral
was
of a judge who was a Catholic,
was a
and
funeral of a judge.
that's consorting with the Antichrist, unfortunately.
Just going to a funeral of a friend.
And he was an elder of the kirk and had spent his
Yeah.
whole life in the church, and he had to go.
I was expelled just for going to the funeral of a friend. There was a good story about him. I'm not saying any Scottish mean jokes, but he was apparently quite a frugal man. And apparently he held a tea party for various lawyers and procurators fiscal, whatever they call themselves, in Scotland. And there was a little tea, and there was tea, and there was a tiny pot of honey and some toast. And someone had the toast and this little pot of honey, and one of the lawyers looked at it and said, "I see your lordship keeps a bee." Very good line.
He's a fine man, though. Fine.
And a good lawyer, no doubt.
Yes,
He
I
would have
think
risen to his eminence if he had.
Yes.
We have odd flashes of Puritanism, don't we? Because I was listening to Radio 5 the other day and they had an actress on, not Angelina Jolie, but the one who's Lara Croft in the latest Tomb Raider film.
Oh, right. Yes.
Cut a long story short, they airbrushed her nipples out of the poster.
Oh.
Her nipples were showing through her costume, just
Right.
two little...
Yeah.
But this was radio.
Not just for the radio. And she had complained about it and said, "Why have you airbrushed my nipples? That's ridiculous. Why don't you just leave them?" And they said, "Oh." And the presenter said, "Well, perhaps they thought they weren't suitable for children."
Nipples not being suitable for children.
She said, "Are you being serious?"
They are
nipples.
expressly designed.
It's for the purpose of the continuation of our race.